They don't remember a time in their life when there was no cell phones, when there's no DVD players, when everybody had a computer, everybody had a flat screen TV. You know, I remember having a black and white TV. That's how old I am. Yeah. And when shows were in color, they still show other shows that were in black and white.
Welcome to How I Embraced the Suck, a podcast where you get to hear from veterans what life in the military is really like. I am your host, Walt, and before we start, you should know that I do not censor the show in any way. You have been warned. Yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt, though. You were talking about the
Discourse.
Yeah, and having a concept that's flexible enough to work for everybody. I think, is that what you were getting at, kind of?
Yeah, there's not going to be a one size fit all, because when you have an idea and it's starting to take shape, or you have two people, or you have a conglomerate of people gathered together to form ideas, it's important that all sides of the story or all sides are observing the same goal. And by stepping back and having people then provide input to the things what they're actually observing, whether it be anecdotal or in real time or whatever the case may be, and listen to that person, their perspective might definitely be just as important as the final product. But then at the end of the day, that whatever that product end up being, whether it be a healthcare plan or whether it be a political, some type of social program, it's not going to be a one size fit all. It's not going to meet everybody's need.
Right. It's impossible with any size of group, or with any substantial size of group. Yeah.
So I don't know if you ever watched the show 30 Rock. You have Liz Lemon. She's a producer for what is the equivalent of Saturday Night Live on, I guess it is CBS or NBC or whatever network it is. Well, there's one like in the later seasons where she has this birthday party for the cast and crew. And so she buys cake, ice cream, and she was like, she says, well, is everybody happy? And then there's one guy that raises his hand. He says, well, this person feels out, he's lactose intolerant and he can't eat the ice cream. So she goes through all this trouble to get lactose free ice cream. And then there was another issue. Someone is gluten-free. So then she has to order a gluten-free cake. And then another one's diabetic and this and that. And so it got out of hand really, really fast.
Sure.
And there's no way. And I guess the point was to say that, hey, we can't make everybody happy. And so, but when people depend upon the government for their happiness, you're going to run into those type of issues where you're trying your best to keep everyone happy. And I think that's where like the big differences between the parties are, where you have, hey, we want everybody to have a fair shake regardless. And we don't care about your freedoms. If we have to take away some of your freedoms in order for someone to have some, a better chance at happiness, then we're going to do that versus, hey, here's you're accountable for what you do, and your accountability is going to bring you happiness. You see? And so now how do we take both of those two ideas, make them into, amalgamate them to the point where now we can take, how can we hold people accountable for what they do versus how can we take and try to make as many people happy owning that, and you can't do that.
Sure.
That's really impossible. So until
Hmm.
we find that happy medium, and I think that's what European countries really try to do. You know, they uh, I think they do their best to try to make everyone happy, and then there's an understanding amongst the citizenry where the boundaries are, and and if you step outside those boundaries, um, it makes they hold you accountable to breaching those boundaries.
Sure.
You know, so I
Well,
don't know
and
how. Go ahead.
yeah, and regardless of the balance that you come up with, I think you're right in that the personal responsibility is the primary factor. If you eliminate that, then whatever your solution is going to um, not be successful, I guess.
Yeah, well, it takes it takes a little bit of ownership. People taking ownership of their actions.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot, like for instance, we have people who, you know, it's all over the news nowadays. So I guess we can talk about it. You know, student loan forgiveness. Okay,
Sure.
so all right, people want an education because we have been programmed to believe that in order to make it in life, we need to have a college or, um, you know, a higher level of education, whether it be a trade or some type of diploma or certificate, allowing for such. So the problem is, at least in my generation, we saved up to achieve that, or we found
Mm-hmm.
ways to, you know, we might have to make some sacrifices. You know, I might have to sacrifice living in a big city and going to a smaller college in order to achieve the same result as going to a big city and going to a more expensive college.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so our opportunity costs were definitely presented to us, and we understood those opportunity costs, and we acted upon what we were able to do in those situations.
Hmm.
Now, you take today's generation, and there is no opportunity cost because they don't see anything other than the one choice that's before them. You know, opportunity cost being, hey, I have more than one choice to look at, and which product is best suits my needs, my requirements.
Mm-hmm.
And so, with that all being said, um, they there's a lot of talk about critical thinking, but when our youth leave high school, they lack that ability to critically think about their future. Whereas I think, at least with my generation, and I'm just, you know, I'm speaking for myself. I had to look at the choices that were before me. I didn't have a choice of other than going to junior college. I had no other choice than to get a Pell Grant.
Mm.
Um, and then on top of that, I ended up, you know, I got the Pell Grant and I squandered the money. I passed my classes, but the problem was there was a great overwhelming guilt because I knew I didn't have to pay that money back. And the guilt was
Sure.
I didn't put as much effort into the class, and I just in some cases I failed miserably and didn't care. You know, I really didn't
Mm.
care because it wasn't I had no stake in the game. So that was one semester of receiving a Pell Grant for 3 classes. Um, I I think it came out to like $500, and the cost of the books, which ended up being probably another 300. So $800 semester.
Sure.
For that, I got I think it was like $2,000, and it was a stipend and it was all free money. It was just a
Sure.
Pell Grant, free money. And after that first semester, and I saw what I did with the money, I just felt really guilty. I was like, I can't do this again because there are people, either if it's a grant, so either people are donating into the system, or the government is providing this particular program the money, but I'm not worthy to do that. So
Yeah.
from that point, I had to make some other decisions, and I realized taking some personal responsibility and whatnot. There was a few things I was lacking, and so I could either join the military, or at that point wasn't really on my radar, or I can go serve a mission for my church. So I decided
Sure.
to go serve a mission for my church. And what's really so on that, the ability to sacrifice, wanting to sacrifice. So I had to pay for it, and or it was paid for, and I was going to another. I ended up going to Georgia, to serve a mission for my church, and it was on somebody else's dime, and but my attitude changed. I put forth a lot of effort. I made sure that because I knew these people, these are friends that actually foot the bill.
Sure.
And so there's that close connection of knowing who the donors were, that I didn't want to waste the money that was afforded for me to go on this endeavor.
Right. Whereas the Pell Grant was just money that showed up in your bank account and nobody's the wiser. Yeah.
Yeah. So I go serve this mission, and, I get an opportunity, I get exposed to avenues of the military that I didn't get to. We're Mormon missionaries on Fort Benning and Fort Gordon.
Sure.
Talking with soldiers, and I just love the lifestyle. Looked appealing to me. And I felt like there was where I gave, there was a little bit taken away from me, and then what was taken back was repaid, was given back to me in a form of a cash settlement. So I gave my body to be trained to be a soldier. In return for that, they paid me. And they also taught me a skill.
Sure. When you joined, yeah.
Yeah, when you join.
Yeah.
So I completely my mission, and I worked for like Sony for a little bit, and I ended up walking into the recruiter's office one of those times, and next thing you know, I'm raising my hand, and I'm braced off to Fort Jackson. And, you go through basic training, you go through all the initial training and everything. And, it was good, I saw what it was good to have a steady paycheck. And it was also good to be able to learn to contribute to a bigger cause. And so here I am in the throes of sacrificing twice, before I even turned 25 years old.
Sure.
I sacrificed my personal life and my education to go on the mission. And then now I'm sacrificing and voluntarily joining the military, and, giving myself to the country. And I actually fell in love with the idea of being in the military, the idea of service. And I felt, to me, I was kind of an idealistic person when I was that, younger, because I felt like it was a higher calling. I felt like, what, I think young men my age should be all doing this. I think young women should be doing this. I think this is the way, as they say in The Mandalorian, right?
Right.
So, and I wasn't doing anything sexy. I was in communications, and I had, I took the time for my mission. I was, this puts me at 23 years old. I'm, anywhere from 4 to 5 years older than the other you know, some
Sure.
of the youngest soldiers. So
Sure.
I'm glad I did those few years, you know, outside of the military, and joined when I did. I was 23, you know, at the peak. My brain is still developing. I'm still learning, you know, gaining appreciation for certain ideas and what have you. And a lot of my political development and ideology started to solidify around this age. And you know, and it was all based off of anecdotal things. It wasn't anything like I sat in a classroom and had a professor preach to me the
Mm-hmm.
the various aspects of conservatism or liberalism. But these are my ideas. These are how I, you know, saw the world. And I saw the
Sure.
world as whatever you put into it is what's going to bring back to you.
Mm.
So that being said, you know, I didn't know everything. I didn't pretend to act like I knew everything, but I kind of approached things as how do I see the world? And one of the big questions to coming to drawing some conclusions where I had to start asking important questions like who am I? Like who is Javier?
Mm.
What does Javier stand for? What does Javier want to be? What is is you know Javier's timeline starts and begins every day when he wakes up and ends when he goes to sleep. And when he wakes up the next day, is that Javier different from the Javier the day prior? So there was a lot of times where I was always sitting there trying to seek self improvement, reading a lot of self help books. One of the books I read was like How to Win Friends and Influence People. And to this day, I think every 16 to 18-year-old should read it, you know, either in high school or coming out of high school. Really good book. It was just like learning how to socialize yourself in a environment where you don't know where your social standing is.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Like there's a small rabbit hole. There's a story where Sears back in the 20s, Sears Roebuck would have during the Christmas season would bring all of their potential hires to dinner at this big, you know, and they'll spread out this big, have a big spread, and everybody sit down. And I guess it was the owner of the company. I think the way it went, it was the owner of the company was set at the head of the table. Food would get served, and he would just watch, you know. And what he was watching for was who seasoned their food before tasting it.
Oh, yeah, I heard about that.
And then those who tasted the food, then seasoned it, those are the people that ended up working for the company. Whereas those who seasoned it without tasting it weren't. And then that lesson, like to this day, I think about that all the time. You know, it doesn't consume my life, but it was just one of those things that when I think about social interactions, I think about that one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why I brought it up.
But making decisions before they have information.
Right. And so that being said, how I started to apply that into my life was, you know, I have to start tasting everything before I'd make a decision on it. That goes from everything from watching the movie to listening to music to whatever case may be.
Sure. Sure.
You know, like I'm not sure what your age is, but I grew up during the age of hip hop, right? And I remember I remember people saying, you know, rap is crap. You know, and you were in two camps. You were either, you know, in metal and rock, or you were in rap and hip hop. You know, they did never mixed, except if you were Run DMC or Aerosmith, right? So, but when I remember as a little kid when Walk This Way came out, it blew my mind. It's like eating a Reese's peanut butter cup, chocolate and peanut butter. You got to be kidding me. This is awesome. Why aren't we all doing this?
Right.
And so I was already in the camp of rock and hip hop being like a combination, and which opened my mind to, because I'm now tasting it before passing judgment. And when grunge hit the scene, I was all about it. I had Pearl Jam, I had Nirvana, and I'll say all this to kind of give you an idea of like how that one story helped shape my life narrative after that.
Sure.
You got to try a little just to see if you like it. And you might have to try a few times just to see, because, some flavors, regionally aligned, are going to taste differently than what you're used to. Like Mexican food,
Right.
I'm from California, man. And I will argue that California Mexican food tastes totally different than any other place you go.
Okay, sure.
It just doesn't taste the same. And, but, here I am as a young soldier, and I'm getting teased by some of the other soldiers. They're talking, hey man, you're not black enough. You're not this, you're not that. But that's I had to make a social sacrifice in order to be who I am. So
sure.
That's, and that social sacrifice was, I listened to the music that I actually like listening to it with unapologetically about it.
Right.
And then my friendships diversified because of it. My outlook on life diversified because of it. People that I didn't think I would ever be friends with, I end up being to this day, lifelong friends, because, I didn't choose to just salt my friendships before trying them out first.
Sure.
I actually, so that's, and then so I complete my initial training in the military, and I totally hate my job. I'm at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. I love Fort Campbell. I love the training at Fort Campbell, but I absolutely hate my job. And I meet my wife. We start dating. We meet, and I was like, hey, I really thinking, while we're dating, I'm thinking about joining Special Forces. And she was like, yeah, that's not going to work for me. And so I'm sitting there thinking to myself, man, all right, I'm really digging this girl. I feel like I love her, and we'll see what happens. And so we get married, and I think about a few months into the marriage, the whole subject comes again. I meet a guy at church who was a Green Beret. And he says to me, hey, when are you going to go to selection? I'm like, well, my wife is totally against it. And he was like, hey, let's have dinner. Bring her over for dinner. Have my wife talk to your wife. Yada, yada, yada. So, so after that dinner, my wife was like, yeah, if you want to do it, go ahead and do it. So, I was greenlit to go to selection, but I still had to make rank at the time in order to do it. So,
sure. What was it at that time? Was it sergeant?
Yeah, you had to be a specialist,
okay,
or corporal, promotable to sergeant.
Oh, gotcha.
And then by the time you start the qualification course, you would have to have been promoted. So,
gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So I was still like a PFC at the time, or maybe I was probably like a specialist at the time, which is the E4. And now it's up to me. And I have to make these really big decisions, but when you think about I was listening to another podcast when they're talking about SEAL training, Navy SEAL training. It blew my mind, man. Like you kind of you're kind of think in your head, like you need to be this superhuman person. And so,
right.
or you have to be that type of guy that has no problem getting up out of bed and just out of the blue, just take off and do 20 miles. It's just, it's one of those things, you psych yourself out. And I remember at the time I psyched, even though I got over the hurdle with my wife saying, yeah, go ahead and do it. I still had to get over the psychological effect of going and doing it. So,
right.
So, every journey every adventure begins with the first step. Right. And so I said, screw it. And I went to the recruiter's office and walked in and filled out all the paperwork. And he sent me back to my unit to get some stuff filled out. And then that's when I found out I was going to another training exercise. And I had it and I couldn't go. I ended up not going to selection until I was transferred to Fort Bragg, and 9/11 happened. And when 9/11 happened, there was nothing in the world that was going to stop me from going to selection. And there was nothing in the world that was going to stop me, because my biggest motivation was we just got attacked and it's time to go get some payback.
Sure.
So I spent the next few years in the Q course, busting my butt, grinding it out, learning a lot about myself. And then I finally made it through, and had a pretty average career, I would say, throughout my time in. And then, I got to a point where I was like, you know what? I need to retire. At some point, I need to retire, and I need to think about the next step. So this is like 4 years out of retirement. I'm 4 years away from retiring.
Yeah.
And I decided, the best route was to find a job that is the closest to being in a civilian that I can be, so I can actually work my way out of the Army. And that's what I did.
Right.
Yeah. So I went and I was an instructor at a ROTC program here in Orlando, and at the University of Central Florida. And I finished, I did my, finished my I retired, and then got my degree afterwards. And now I still work for the Army, supporting training throughout the Army, which is something I really love, but I'd rather be out. I'd rather be at the range shooting with the guys, private some, throwing some lead down range, going through a shoot house, giving instructions on the shoot house. It's just stuff I miss,
Yeah.
I
but
then,
but you can also go home every night.
Right.
And if a general walks on the course, you just like, hello, sir, instead of, oh boy, what's he here for?
Yeah. Yeah. I never got flustered when a general came by, because they already lived their lives with people hopping and popping around them. And I just want always to be myself, and so I never really, always was, always kept my military bearing, but I didn't let who I was talking to ever influence the way I act.
Sure.
It was one of those things. And there's a poem by Rudyard Kipling, and one of the big lines is, if you can, and the gist of it is, the gist of the entirety of the poem is a father talking to his son. And one of the lines in that poem, he talks about if you can move about, if you can move in like certain circles and not let that influence the way you behave. And then he goes on to talk about all these other things. If you could lose
Sure.
everything, lose your house, lose your family, lose everything, and look yourself in the mirror and say, I can get it all back. You know, and it's just like, if like all these little scenarios, and at the end of it, he was like, if you can do all these things and still walk away, keeping your head up, then the world is yours. And that's just the gist of it. And I know, you know,
Sure.
I didn't even try to paraphrase it because I don't have it memorized. But that's, you know, that poem there actually was another thing that shaped me as a father. It shaped me because, you know, it shaped me in the sense that I wish my dad was always there to give me those, to remind me of these points of view, you know?
Right.
And I could, you know, whenever I would read that particular poem, I would imagine my dad actually saying these words to me. And so I was able to eternalize what was said and then reflect, you know, the accent, you know, to get some perspective out of it. So, but like, and then I get lost, you know, and I can easily get lost in a thought, and then I don't want that thought to be a fleeting thought. So I'd start to write it down. And then some of the best things I've ever written were, you know, I get caught in that little, that mindset. And next thing you know, I was like, all right, I got to type this down. I'm sitting there typing. And then next thing you know, I have something that's beautiful to me, full of grammatical errors. And, you know, it's probably grammatically not the best, but you get the gist of it. And
I've heard that's a great way to write, is just to not let grammar and spelling interrupt the flow, but just let all the words out, and then you can always go back later and adjust and correct and everything. But if you stop that flow, you know, it's tough getting it going again.
Yeah, it really is. I'm not much of a writer, but when I put thought into it, it makes me drop my own panties, you know. But yeah, that's you know, the gist of who I am. You know, my time in the Army did a number on me. Both psychologically and physically, and I didn't realize, like, physically, you know, you're not 29, you're not 25 forever,
right? in your mind, you are,
right?
But physically, it's like, hey, when did I get old?
Yeah, man, it's just I could almost tell you the day too, where we had just moved here to Florida, and I was sitting in my office at the university. I was like, man, this doesn't feel right. I'm hurting. Like, I haven't, like, my back is like legitimately hurting. So I laid down on the floor, and this major walks by, and he was like, hey man, you all right? I'm like, yeah, it's just my back. You know, I'm just trying to, you know, doing all these stretches. And he was like, oh man. And he goes, in the next 3 months, man, I'm gonna be watching you, because you came here and you were running. You're in good shape. Now I can see it starting to wear on you. Like, and he recommended a few things to me.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, whatever, you know. And then sure enough, man, like I can't participate in runs anymore. I can't stand up more than 20 minutes. And then you go to the doctor and they say, my doctor looks at me. I'm 6'3" at the time. I was maybe like 260 pounds. And he's like, "You're overweight." I go, "Dude, if I lose 50 pounds, if I lost 50 pounds right now, you would think I was sick."
Right.
Like I have that type of body where
Sure.
I develop muscle really fast. But I mean, and when I say, my gut is not like flopping over my belt or anything like that.
Sure.
I don't have saggy boobs or anything, but but the doctor makes you think, "Hey man, you're, I remember him putting on my, my chart, morbidly obese." And I'm like, I wanted to punch him, because, and then he was like, "Well, lose the weight and your back won't hurt." I'm like, and these are the things, this is a guy with a doctorate in medicine.
Sure.
He's just,
yeah.
And I'm like, no, if you saw me when I was 10 pounds lighter, I didn't look healthy,
Sure.
And I still was in the same pain 10 pounds lighter. And so I was, got real disgruntled, and I felt really hopeless, just like I got things going on with my body I can't quite explain. I have these chronic pain issues. And by the way, I'm going through depression right now, and I'm still in the Army. And you go to the Army docs, and the docs, they say, all right, dude, we're going to take you off the Motrin that we've had you on for all these years, and we're going to put you on these other painkillers. And the next thing you know, they're causing addiction. Not with me. There's a few drugs they tried with me, and I just, after taking it once, like, drugs don't do well with me.
Sure. Yeah.
They don't. It just, I don't like the way it feels. I don't see why anybody would want to feel like, if taking a Percocet makes you feel this way, why? Like, if it makes me feel this way, why in the hell do you want to take it? And so, I guess I'm blessed in a sense to have that, where I take a drug and it makes me feel a certain way, and I don't like it.
Sure.
So,
like a natural, a built-in aversion.
Yeah, and I think psychologically it has to do with my, growing up with drugs in the family.
Sure.
Seeing the side effects. So I think some of that has to play with it. But then I just think genetically, I don't buy it, because I'm the Nancy Reagan generation. Just say no, And so that was our indoctrination, saying no to drugs, which is crazy today, where our kids are being indoctrinated in other aspects, which blows my mind. And we're casually letting it happen without putting up much of a fight, except until recently. If the news is right, recently, people are starting to push back on the woke. I hate using that word, but the woke agenda, the progressive agenda.
Right.
We're seeing it. We have an excellent governor here in Florida, Ron DeSantis, who, he's putting his foot down, and I think that's what we need. Someone to put their foot down. And I really don't care about what a person thinks of himself, like, hey, I'm not comfortable in my skin. All right, that's none of my business. That's on you. Um,
Sure. Yeah.
that's your deal. And I know you're probably going through some things, but please understand that where your feelings about how you feel about yourself starts, my right to not listen to you is going to be front. It's going to be front and center.
Right.
I'm going to respect you. I'm going to respect you. And you know what? And if someone comes and threatens you, guess what? I'm going to stand in between you and that person, because I'm not going to allow an innocent person to get hurt. Not in my presence.
Sure. Yeah.
I will also protect, fight for your right to be who you feel like you are. But hey, you got to understand there's going to be I'm going to limit that. When you start indoctrinating or trying to coax my grandson or my daughters or some other kid into what you feel is what makes you happy,
Sure.
that's where I'm gonna start pushing back, and I'm gonna be like, hey, no, and so it goes back to the beginning where I was talking about finding how do we take this situation and what we feel is the right thing and find a happy medium. And I think we can do that by, especially when it talks to the gender and the other the alphabet of sexuality.
Right. Right.
I think there's a happy medium we can find where it's not toxic and it's not in your face. It's not in your face. And the same thing goes with race too. My generation, I guess I'm Generation X, they say, or the Pepsi generation or whatever they call this, the MTV generation.
Mm-hmm.
But, my parents, I think our grandparents were the dinosaurs of an era that was no longer there. If that makes any sense. I remember,
sure.
Like our grandparents and our great grandparents were the whole harbor really big racial tensions. Any racial tension I feel now or before, so any racial tension I felt before that, before let's say 2005, 2008. Yeah, 2008 was a good ending point. 2000, anything before 2008, if anything was racial, it was to be vindictive. It was straight out of vindictiveness. Like just to piss you off, I'm gonna call you this word, whatever that case be.
Sure.
After 2008, it became this, and then before 2008, it was everybody was getting along. People were happy. People were. I didn't, did I feel like there was racism in the military? I'm gonna say something kind of controversial. In the support in the Army, in the support MOSs where you have the majority of the racism, it was perceived by those people of color that was their place. That was where they wanted to be because because at the time, I will say that majority of your combat arms were white. The majority of your combat arms guys were, especially infantry, were white. If you're now, the one branch in the military where that was combat arms, where you might have more Black Americans, was
Mm-hmm.
artillery. Was in artillery.
Oh, okay. Huh.
And because they were the first units actually. I read somewhere once, and I could be wrong, but one of the
Sure.
first units to integrate that was integrated was an artillery unit, and Sammy Davis Jr. was part of that unit.
Oh, okay. Huh.
Back
So
in
they've
the
just
day.
that for some reason that tradition has continued or something, maybe.
Yeah, and so I think a lot of and I think one of the, but yeah, anyway, so a lot of your combat service support in occupations in the military were, like communications, like it was filled with African Americans and Hispanics, and um, I remember when I was at Fort Campbell, my unit, like my unit was predominantly Black. Transportation, so there was a lot of there was a stigmatism that, hey, if you're a white, you're going combat arms. If you're anything else, you're going to be
Sure.
some type of combat support.
Sure.
Well, it was funny because when I was in the Q course, some of my white friends would ask me questions as if there was like a Black caucus, like a board of Black people that make up the rules.
Right.
And then, like, the one question, my buddy, we were on a ruck march, and he asked me, he was like, "Hey, Mackie." I was like, "What's up, Travis?" He was like, "Hey, dude, I got a question for you, and don't take it the wrong way." I'm like, "All right, we've had these conversations already."
Sure.
And he already knows where I'm at. And then he was like, "Why is it that there's more?" And this is back in 2002, 2003.
Okay.
He was like, "So why don't you see too many brothers in the infantry?" And I was like, in my head, I wanted to be a jerk and be like, the next time, that's a good question to ask. And the next time I'm at my all Black
right. Board meeting,
meeting, I will ask that question.
Right. We'll pass a resolution and get back to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The black caucus.
Yeah.
It's like the racial draft with Dave Chappelle.
Right.
But anyway, so he got me thinking. I was like, "Hey, man," and he got me really thinking about it. And I sat back, and so I called my dad, and I'm like, "Hey, Dad." My dad's in the military. And he was in the infantry, and he was in Vietnam. He's a Vietnam vet. He got out, went to the National Guard or Reserves, and was an combat engineer. And so he's always been in combat arms until I joined the Army. And by the time I joined the Army, he's in the Signal Corps, and the same communications. And that's the reason why I went communications, is because that's even though I wanted to be an airborne ranger, he was like, "No, you really, just dip your foot in the water, see if you like it. In the meantime, just get a job that you can take, you can get some skills and leave the Army if you don't like it." I'm like, "All right, check, got it." So I call him up, and he's like, and I asked a question, and he goes, "Well, you do know I was an infantry, right? I'm an infantryman." And I'm like, "Yeah, yes, sir." And he was like, "I'm a combat engineer." "Yes, sir." And, I served and fought in Vietnam." "Yes, sir." And he goes, "I got drafted, and that's what I was told I needed to do." And I'm like, "All right." And he goes, "A lot of us didn't want to be there. It didn't matter if you were white, Black, but we had a job to do."
Sure.
The reason, and he goes, you gotta understand that, for African Americans, it was hard for them to come back from World War II and World War I and to be treated the way they were treated.
Sure.
So as time went on, yes, military was a profession that was worth going into, but it wasn't worth dying. The country that you were fighting to protect wasn't worth dying for if they weren't willing to protect your or grant you the same rights as everyone else.
Sure.
And so that being said, it kind of opened my eyes as to, all right, what my relationship to our country is. My dad was a patriot. All that being said, my dad was a patriot through and through. He loved the United States of America. I only use that in past tense because, he's no longer with us. But I can't think of a time while he was living where my stepdad did not, at any point, how he would, he never said anything bad about the United States. Now, there was things that he didn't like, but don't get that, mixed up with his love for his country. And that was something that he instilled in us. And so, so I'm with Travis again some days later, and we're sitting there talking, and I brought the subject back up, and I was like, hey man, so back to your question, this is another ruck march. And he, the deep philosophical, it's one of the cool things about the military. You can be in the middle of, sucking at something, and in a rainstorm, you can have these philosophical questions that keep you occupied, keep your mind on something else other than the pain you're going through at the time. Right. So Here we are, 8 miles into a ruck march, a 12-mile ruck march. And he's like asking me, we're talking about this thing, and this particular conversation. And he was like, wow, that's really, there were some things he never thought about. And he honestly and sincerely wanted to know more. He was just, hey man, you're the closest black, you're the only black friend I have right now. So let me ask you some questions while we got a chance.
Right.
And subsequently, so later on that week, we were out at Camp McCall, and that's where we do some of our initial, our life as a Q course student has a very intimate relationship with Camp McCall, North Carolina. And we're out there training, and at this particular point in training, the cadre, and this is kind of along the same lines. So in my Q course class at the time, there was probably like 8 black guys, a handful of Asian dudes, another couple dozen Hispanic dudes, and everybody else is white. But, demographically, that wasn't on our mind, but that's just to give you an idea.
Sure. Yeah.
Of the kind of general makeup, and the cadre, the instructors, kind of along the same path. There's like one black guy and a couple Asian dudes, and all the rest are white. And maybe a Hispanic dude here and there. Rest were white guys. And so they were like, hey, you guys get to roast. You can roast on the constructors, or you can do a skit, as long as you don't do, as long as you keep it clean, and you have fun. We really want you to, just like they do this to like decompress. So
sure.
My dumb butt get up there. Well, I wouldn't say it's dumb, but I do this thing where it's Ebonics. I do the jump master. I do all the jump commands in Ebonics.
Right.
Using slang, and so I do this whole thing, and people are just dying laughing. Everybody's having a good time. I'm having a good time, but none of the black guys are laughing, and I don't care. I'm like,
sure.
I'm being me because that's who I am, right? So that evening, one of the black guys come up to me, and And he goes, we ended up being friends later on, but he was pissed. Like, he was really upset. He was like, "Hey man, you really set us back." And, I'm like thinking to myself, how in the heck did I like one joke set all of black people back in the military?
Sure. Yeah.
And so I was like, I looked at him, I was like, whatever, man. Like, you're the same person that will probably sit there and listen to Red Fox, call every white person in the room a honky, just and think it's funny. But then the moment, Robin Williams go up there and he drops the M-bomb, you want to start throwing blows. No,
right.
You got to be. And so, we let bygones be bygones. There was really no hard feelings, but there was a point though that he was trying to make. And here I am, a few years older now. And, I read a statistic, that at any given time, there's 37 black Navy SEALs, or out of all the SEALs that are on teams, 35. So let me back up. To be in special operations, you're the top 1%. Right? You go through a selection, you make it through all the training. You're now a member of the top 1% of the Army, right?
Sure.
Or special operations. Now, if you broke it down demographically, then you're like, then I would be less than 1%, or a tenth of percent or 100th of a percent, the top of any different demographic, right? So that being said, so there's at any given time, there's less than 40 SEALs out of, I think, I'm just going to say 2,000. That number might be off. Out of 2,000, right? That's less than 1%, right? In special forces, in the Air Force, I think there's one African American pararescue guy. One.
Oh, okay.
One out of maybe a couple hundred. All right. I don't think there's any JTACs. But in special forces, there's like less than 500 out of, say, 10,000. And again, that number might be off. It might be less than that. I think it's like 7,000. But that's still a big number, right? And then so recently, so that just gives you an idea of the general makeup. And then Asians make up a big, depending on the group and depending on where you're at, the Asians make up a pretty decent size. Latinos make up a huge, I think outside of whites, Latinos is probably the second largest minority group in SOF. And then you have Asians and then blacks, and which will really blow your mind, because there's, but it is diverse. The special operations is diverse, and but there's a high standard. I would rather have those low numbers, knowing that there's a high standard, than there. So my point is, I'd rather have those high, those low numbers with a high standard, knowing that the country is getting its best out of those men, than a higher number with lower standards, just so that there can be more inclusion and they can diversify what soft looks like. Now, this is where, I don't know if you saw that article. It might have been floating around, where it talks about how they're trying, like this writer would rather have a more diverse special operations that doesn't produce the best results than having it remain the same, producing the highest results. That makes no sense whatsoever. Like, you're just, That's like saying, "Hey, I want a fire alarm, the little smoke alarms on my house that only works 25% of the time."
Well,
Just
yeah,
so that
it's different priorities.
right.
It uh, a vastly different priority wrapped around um, a situation, I guess. Like you're saying, the main priority is that soft be capable, and that those there deserve to be there. And then they're saying, this guy's saying, well, no, it's more important that it be the correct reflection of culture or whatever, potentially to the detriment of accomplishing the mission. So it's different viewpoint.
Yeah, it's just it like, hey, let's hire some paraplegic police officers and firefighters and expect the
Right.
same result. It just no, 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 no. You need to have the best. Let's that we don't when we go to the Olympics, we don't put our mediocre. Mediocre people don't make the team just so that they have a chance.
Sure.
No, people were actually put their heart and soul into this, and the military. So the writing was on the wall. So this is 2015, and special operations and combat arm units do what these things called it's called a mod demo, and basically it's like a modular demonstration of your capabilities, and usually all you're doing is like taking um, equipment that you train with and displaying it, and then when people come up to you, you kind of like explain what your mission and capabilities are.
Oh,
So
okay,
we
sure.
yeah, it's like show and tell, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
a lot of times these are done for VIPs, higher ups, wherever the case may be, And so we had some staffers from DC come down to Fort Bragg, and they wanted to see what our capabilities are, what is soft. And usually when this happens, they're escorted by a green suitor, a member of the Army, and they escort them so that they can help answer questions. If we use any Army jargon, they can explain what we're talking about, kind of puts into
Sure.
context everything. So my team, it was one of those things where whoever touches their nose last is it. And we drew the short straw, and it was our day to do it. So we went out, and we had, we brought out all our weapons, we brought out all our kit. Um, we gave a little demonstration of what we do. Each guy on the team talked about what their job was, and it got to me, and it was this little black. The green suitor was a black female sergeant major, the highest rank you can get as an enlistment. So as being enlisted in the Army, and this is her. She's the one escorting these staffers, and these staffers are like interns essentially from DC that are they're high schoolers, like not high schoolers, but sophomores and juniors in college.
Sure.
you know
Sure.
so we're talking about what we do, and she comes up to me after my demonstration. I'm the engineer on the team, and I'm talking about explosives, and I have some fake explosives and some whatnot in front of me, and I'm talking about what I do for my job. And the staffers move on, but the sergeant major, she stops in front of me, and almost as if she's expecting my reaction to be the same as her reaction, she looks at me and says, "How do you feel about having female Green Berets on your team?" And I said, honestly, I think that's the dumbest thing you can ever do to the female. That's the worst thing you can possibly do to a special forces team.
Oh, sure.
And, and was I kind of going overboard? I probably was by making that statement, but I stand by it. I feel like it will destroy marriages, regardless of
Sure.
anything that happens, because now, wives who are used to their husbands being away for long periods of time are got it in the back of their head that the one chick on their team is probably sleeping with everybody. Well, that's
sure.
not that girl's problem. It's the wife's problem. That's what the argument
Sure.
be,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
Right. But, you still have to take that in consideration. There's things that you still have to take in consideration. You got to understand that not everybody in the world treats women the same. It's a man's world in other places.
Sure.
And so I was like, I think that's really, really dumb. And she looked at me and it was like, well, it's going to happen regardless if you like it or not.
Right.
Check.
Well, then why'd you ask me?
Well, because the elitism in DC is palpable. And it does. And then you can be a peon, you can be a janitor in DC cleaning the president's toilet, and your social ranking amongst other janitors is so much higher than it would be if you were at the Marriott hotel doing the same thing.
Right.
Right. It's all about whose butt you're wiping, right?
Yep.
And these elites come down with these ideas. And so there's a few things. A lot of these people are out of touch with what they think what the military experience should be versus what the military experience actually is. Okay. So let me qualify that statement. So let's say, for instance, you have a infantry company of 180 guys. All right. 40, you got 3 platoons of guys or 4 platoons of 40 guys, 44 guys. So what's that? 172 guys. All right. So you have 172 guys in the company, and one of them, and they're getting ready to deploy. So for months, these guys they're knowing each other's, they know how each other move. They're getting in the groove. Their, discipline is really high. And then one guy in that group says, you know what? I don't like my penis anymore. I think I want to be a woman now. Okay. So now you just diminished your capability. So is that guy replaceable? Yeah. But here's the reality. That guy is still on the company books. Okay. And he can be taken off the books and put somewhere else, but now you have to take someone who doesn't have the same experience and put them in. All right.
Oh, sure.
So now you have that guy, he's probably now doing somebody else, another occupation. Like he's a qualified infantryman, but now he's doing administrative duties because he's taking hormone treatments. Right.
Sure.
So now, this guy is on the unit's books, and it's like, you can't do nothing with them while they're doing their treatment, or, I don't know what the case. I mean, I might be talking out of my butt on this, or even with pregnancy. Now this I can probably talk about, because pregnancy, like you have a female and, she's qualified. Sure. And now if she's always gone, you got to have someone fill in her position. Now, when you go out to the field, you have to have someone fill in her position. But because she's pregnant and she's part of the unit, she's still on the company books, and you can't fill in that position until they transfer her. They actually put her in so what they do is they take them out and put them in another unit so that they can still progress in their career.
Mm-hmm.
And it ends up happening is the women, I want females to serve in the military. I just don't want it to be one of those situations where the guys are making all the sacrifice while people who want this special treatment get out of actually serving. They're working. There's a difference between serving and working. You're serving when you're actually making a sacrifice. You're working when you're going home, without making the same sacrifice. Of going out to the field without making the same sacrifice of going to going on deployments or TDYs, whatever the case may be. If you're in a unit taking up space and you're not actively deploying or training with the units, and you're going through, pregnancy, I'm not going to even talk about, because that's a natural thing. That's a thing that it occurs naturally in nature.
Sure.
I don't think a grizzly bear that doesn't like its nuts is going to bite them off and say, "Hey, now I'm a female bear. Accept me for who I am." No, that's not going to happen. And so my point is, when we do these things, these people who want this stuff, they don't realize what they're doing to the unit. They're only thinking about themselves. And I guess what I would propose for those people, hey, do your 6 years, right? And at the last 2 years of your time, we'll pull you out of your unit so you can go focus on that and getting out of the Army. And let me put somebody else in that position so you're not eating up a space.
Sure.
Or, hey, let me pull you out for 2 years so you can focus on that. And you can still serve, find ways to serve, but the problem there, and there's other problems that the military inherently, when you do things like that, now, there's a command involved, and I just don't like the military becoming just a big social experiment. I really don't.
Sure.
I don't like the military being a place where people go to figure out whether or not they are, what their sexuality is. Do that on your own time. Don't work. If you figure it out, while you're your uniform, make sure it doesn't interfere with your daily duties. And so the big question, I guess, we can walk away from all this is, why do I care? I'm not in the military anymore.
Right.
Yeah. So why do I care? What's the big so what? As the military goes, so goes the country. And so why do I say that? So let's take COVID, for instance, right? When soldiers were saying no to COVID, there were a lot of civilians out there saying, and prior military saying, well, you're given an order, so you do it.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
Right. We don't follow orders, not today. We don't follow orders today blindly. Meaning, the person issuing out the order usually gives an intent. The intent is, the whole point of the intent is for the subordinate leaders to be able to take the ball and run with it. All right. But not every leader has looked at every possible course of action and has come up with a solution to that course of action. All right. So, because he can't think of everything. Back in the day, it was the leader's responsibility to think about everything. And it was totally on him at the end of the day that whatever the mission, was a success, whether he did what he was supposed to do or he said he was going to do, regardless of the outcome. And so the train of thought in Army thinking back in like when I first joined was, hey, you get an order, you do it. Then as I got older, it was, hey, and we're going to give you the intent or what my intentions are, and we're going to let you run with it and get the same results.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And so the intent, I forgot what I was talking about originally.
Just the the change in leadership.
Yeah. So the
from
intent,
just questioning orders, the ability to question orders.
Yeah. So the thing is, all right. So usually the leader, when he's giving the orders, he's going to give you like the most dangerous courses of action. And a lot of times that's developed by subordinate leaders, because again, a general can't think about everything. He's thinking about big picture things. But most dangerous courses of action, most likely courses of action, wherever the case may be. And so then those are all developed down at the subordinate levels. And so if something seems too risky, we can try to mitigate it by changing the plan. As long as there's a plan in place, I don't want anyone to think that people can question everything, because at some point you're going to have to follow in a direct order. So but there was no, I guess my point is, during COVID, there was no one thought to think about the most dangerous courses of action, the most likely courses of action. They were just doing what the president said and following through.
Sure.
And I feel like it could have been handled differently. And there's no reason for any of these young men who have been kicked out of the Army. There's no reason for them getting kicked out of the military. None whatsoever. Especially what's going on with COVID today. You got all these young kids dying, and I don't even know for sure if it's because of COVID. So I can't really qualify.
Sure. Yeah.
But there's definitely something questioning as to the validity of this vaccine. Like, is it a cause? When you have doctors saying, it's like, I was really so surprised about COVID is how fast doctors just fell in line, because I guess it fell in line with the practice, with science so fast. But
sure,
how long does a drug usually go through a trial before it's deemed safe? Years, at least 5 years.
Right.
I'm in Army acquisitions, and there's usually a 5-year process for, for any type of training aid that's like a simulator. Like, if a simulator was going from concept to putting it in the soldier's hands, 5 years. That's how long it takes.
Sure.
And I think, if I remember right, it's the same thing for medicine. But I don't want to talk like I know what I'm talking about. But so at the end of the day, man, I sit back and I was like, this is a bad thing to do to the military. And I know the numbers are small. I think it's less than 10,000 soldiers across all 4 branches are being chaptered out of the military for refusing to take the vaccine. And so I think the subordinate leaders, like, this was made up top without talking to the subordinate lead. Like, how is this going to affect the population of the military, and how is this going to affect the perception of the civilian populace
Sure.
of its view of the military. And maybe it was, maybe the brains that be looked at it and was like, you know what, it's such a low number, we're willing to risk it. It's a risk, worth taking. But
Mm-hmm.
to what end? To what it, like, what's
Right.
like the question is, like, what is this? Like, there has to be some, like, I hate to be a conspiracy theorist, but there has to be something bigger than this, that you just can't, I just can't put my finger on it. Like, why are we looking at, why are we letting COVID, because post COVID is worse than going through COVID, in my opinion. Like, everything that's going on right now is worse when COVID was in full swing.
Sure.
As far as the deficit, as far as uh, uh, the religion of global warming, and then you have all the riots. I think what we're going through right now, post COVID, is pretty bad, and because it's the psychological effect. Because we don't trust the government anymore. We don't trust the political leaders. We don't trust the media anymore. We don't trust. And I'm thoroughly convinced that there's foreign actors that are at play within our government that have infiltrated our government and infiltrated the powers that be and are manipulating. And I don't really think that the president of the United States is really in charge right now. There's a cabal of his administration that's actually calling the shots, and he doesn't know what shots are being called.
Right.
He's too busy, sniffing little girls' heads and eating ice cream cones to follow his own narratives.
Right.
So it's really scary. I was listening to another podcast the other day, and they were talking about SEER school. There was a Navy SEAL talking about SEER school. And in SEER school, SEER stands for Survival, Escape, Resistance, Evade.
Mm-hmm.
And like, one of the first stories you read in SEER school, or anecdotal videos you'll watch, is in North Korea during the Korean War that captured 14 sailors. And the North Koreans were very good at propaganda, and they were very good at convincing, getting people to turn against their country, especially U.S. sailors. So there was 14 of a crew that was thoroughly convinced that the United States was evil. They convinced them that they were evil. But the whole point of SEER school is teaching you to resist against. It's to resist against the. How did you say it? It's to resist against the powers that be that are trying to transform this government into something that it really isn't. That's the gist of it.
Sure.
And so, SEER school haven't gone through the training myself. I haven't been the same since I've been through the training. Like, I don't, like, after going through the training, and I start to see the patterns that they were talking about that were established in the training and some of the popular news broadcasts at the time. Like, for instance, Sean Hannity, he was great at really repeating the same things over and over and over again until you were convinced that it was almost true. And like, regardless if it was true or not, he will repeat the same thing over and over and over again. And that's what they do. That's the, we can see it through the transgender, or you can see it through climate change. COVID, 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 COVID. You're not safe if you're not wearing a mask. If you get the vaccine, we can stop wearing a mask. It's not, you can't transmit it. So they start repeating these lies. They start telling these lies
Sure.
and repeating these lies. And then they couldn't remember what lies they were telling. And then, you probably seen it on the internet where they have like 40 different news broadcast, and the broadcaster is saying verbatim, like
Right.
each,
Sure.
they break it down. They're all saying things verbatim as if scripted. And that's what makes me think and convinces me that there is something bigger happening. And it's if we don't wake up, if we don't really keep her, it will take for us, the sacrifices it would take would be astronomical, and it all has to do with turning off the cell phone and turning off TV.
Yeah.
Seriously, I
Yep.
mean, you would have to stop using the cell phone and the internet and restrict yourself to only using those things just for work, and that's it. In order for things to, but as long as we're connected to these devices, they have all the control that they can possibly have over our lives. They know where we're at. They know what they can find out who we're talking to, when we're talking to them. Your phone can check into into a store to say, hey, I'm at this store, so that now they can receive advertisements onto your blog or onto your feeds, your Twitter feed. You go to the doctor now. Your smartwatches can transfer data to your doctor, and your doctor can now say, hey, I saw you had a fall. You fell 3 weeks ago, and you're all right. Tell me about it. Like, how do you know I fell?
Sure.
Or
Crazy.
for women, they can check out they can check for their menstrual cycles, when they're having, like, all this information that we're putting on these devices can be captured and analyzed. And those analysis will give the right people the right information they need to socially engineer your thoughts to whatever way they want you to think. And it's really scary to even talk about, and it's not even, and I'm not even being conspiratorial about it. This is what's actually happening.
Sure.
And as to what degree it's happening and who it's happening to, it's all a question in the air. And the sad thing is, the way they can get away with it is that not every country has the same FCC laws as the United States. So say, for instance, they don't have to do it. They don't have to start doing it in the United States first, but they can go somewhere where the laws aren't as strict or looser. The laws are a little bit looser, and they can run all these algorithms on the indigenous population of any country, and then take
just
those
to
same
test the system,
just to test this, to do a what they call a functions check, right? And that functions check can last a year or two, and then they can say, all right, let's take this to the United States, and then they can start tweaking it however they want to tweak it, and they can get it so that when you're on Twitter, like if you ever notice you go to a Joe Biden, like I follow Joe Biden, right? So I read his comments. In the first five or six comments, well, let me back up a little bit. So during the election 2020, I was subscribed to Biden. I was following Trump before they kicked him off on Twitter, and I would see. I started noticing a pattern. So I would read the comments in Trump, in the first say like 30 comments were all like, F you, Trump, you're a traitor, what about Russia, blah, 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 blah. And then you break that layer, you get past that layer, then it was like, oh, I'm so glad. And then all the positives will be behind it, trailing it.
Oh, I see where you're going. Yeah.
Yeah. So you go to Biden. He was like, oh, they're cupping the balls and they're like at the base and they're just like, ugh. And then you see all this, hey, we're glad you're our president. And it's like, it'll go like 20, like I think his is about 15 on average, 15 to 17 on average of positive. And then after that, it's all crappy or then you have like the Santas, you have all like 3 or 4 negatives and then all the rest are positive.
Sure.
Then you look at Charlie Crisp, he will have one positive. He has like 248,000 followers versus DeSantis having like 4 or 5 million. And he'll have one or two positives, and then the rest are like, F you, you suck. Why are you even trying? And so it's really comical to hear. But I started to see this pattern, and I'm wondering like who controls like whoever the person's posting, you'll see that they have a lot of people following them. And I'm like, how in the heck? Like, I'll like the other day I was at 9,975 followers.
Quit bragging.
No. Check this out.
Yeah. No,
I lost 500. I lost 500. So I'm like, wow, what did I say? And then next thing you know, I'm back up to like 9,700. Right. So I'm like, what the heck is going on here? And then I see everybody else saying, hey, I'm losing followers. I'm gaining, I'm down. I think it was one person said, hey, I'm down like 500 or 600 followers. And I only follow it out of curiosity because I have not been able to break 10,000 no matter.
Oh, sure.
And I think there's like you, I don't know what you have to do to break 10,000. I don't know if you have to buy a boost or whatever, but right. I cannot break 10,000 and to save my life. Like I've been up to like 909 or 9,990 and then go back to like 9,000 to 9,600. I'm like, how did that even happen?
Right.
So there's something in the algorithm that doesn't like me, it's just like, hey, you're not going to get 10 grand, and I don't know if you get 10 grand, they start having to compensate you what the deal is.
Right.
But it's just really weird. And I'm surprised. I'm just happy to be where I'm at, and I'm not really sure if I'm reaching out. Like, I'm not really sure of the type of person that I'm reaching out to. Or what is exactly an appeal, or just the goons on Twitter are is a kind of a tight knit group of people that have been around for a while. I think I've been on Twitter since 2019, 2018. I think.
Okay.
No, 2020 maybe. I don't know.
Okay.
But I haven't been on Twitter long, and I got, Army buddies of mine getting on. I'm like, dude, stay off, because, the sergeant major I put the sergeant major of the Army on blast quite a bit, and he responds back. Somebody's responding back, and I don't want you guys I don't want you guys getting wrapped up in, liking one of my comments, and the next thing you know, you're not getting promoted for whatever.
Right.
So,
yeah, I realized that we're doing this a little backwards today, and I never got around to introducing you. So if someone's stuck around this long, we're talking to Javier, who let's see, I think if I did the math correctly, there could be somebody listening to this episode who just joined on an age waiver, who was not alive when you first deployed. So So
Yeah.
or if I'm incorrect, it's very close to that. So there's history. There's some history here in the room.
Yeah. So the contextually, when I was a instructor at the University of Central Florida, there were kids I was instructing that I was teaching military leadership to that was anywhere between 3 and 7 years old when 9/11 happened.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they lived their whole life knowing that we were in war, and they joined knowing that they could go to combat. So
Oh, right. Yeah, they don't remember a pre-GWAT America.
right. They don't remember a time in their life when there was no cell phones, when there's no DVD players, when everybody had a computer. Everybody had a flat screen TV. You know, I remember having a black and white TV. That's how old I am. Yeah.
Right.
And when shows were in color, they still show other shows that were in black and white.
Right. Right. Exactly.
That's kind of wild, ain't it? You know, so it's the world is moving fast, and is forcing our youth to grow up faster than they need to be.
Mm-hmm.
I remember we didn't put an electric device if we didn't put a screened device into our kids' hands until they were teenagers. And when I did it, I regretted it. I regretted it. To this day, when I think about it, I was like, man, that was probably one of the dumbest things me and my wife have ever did growing up, was getting our girls phones, because now they can shut us out of their life.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's what I kind of felt what was happening when we did that. So, I wish we can go back in time, and I wish we can go back in time and rethink the impact of these electronic devices would have on ourselves. Because all we did was say, wow, this is really cool. We have the technology. Remember Palm Pilots? I don't know how old you are, but
Yep.
Palm Pilots. Yep. Like someone looked at that and said, hey, why don't we make this a phone? And next thing you know, I mean, at one point they were able to I remember I was working for Sony, and we would sell Palm Pilots, and they had, you can connect it to the internet, but you have to, take your phone outlet and stick it into a little device, another device,
right?
And you can get on the internet and send email. That was about it. You couldn't search, baseball stats or anything like that.
Right.
So, but technology, I'm glad we have it, but I think it's going to be our crutch. It's going to be, because I mean, I don't know if you ever watched Star Trek.
And, no, I'm vaguely familiar.
Like when Captain Kirk, he would have his little comms device, and it was a flip phone,
right,
essentially what we call a flip phone, but he was, and I remember seeing that as a kid. I'm like, man, am I going to ever live in that world,
mm-hmm.
And little do I know, I'm within that generational range where I am living in that world. And I wonder how much more of what was sci-fi when I was a kid is going to be reality as a senior citizen,
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure.
I remember the first Nintendo Entertainment System, and very few people had it.
Mm-hmm.
And even when I got it, I only played maybe an hour's worth of games, and then I was outside doing other things,
Right. Living.
Yeah, and there was and two, I think the reason why I didn't play a lot is because we only had one TV, and I couldn't hog up the TV for my dad. You
Right.
know,
Right.
so he'll get upset and be like, "Hey, I want to watch the game. You got to turn that off." And I didn't have a TV in my room. But nowadays, you can, it doesn't take much to buy a TV, and then they're pretty
Sure.
transportable. And if you break it, just buy a new one. But yeah, man, there's a lot of things that I've grown to, like being able to travel. So my wife and I, we do quite a bit of traveling when post or pre-COVID. So before COVID, we would go all over the world. I went to, I don't know if you've ever been to Iceland.
No.
But if you ever get a chance, man, I highly recommend it.
Oh, I bet.
It's a fantastic opportunity to see terrain change in a matter of minutes. Like you can be driving along the coastline, and it'll be nothing but lava flows, and then you hit an old lava field, and it's all has grass all grown over it, and then 5 miles later you're up in the mountains and it's raining. It's
Wow.
just a beautiful country. The domesticated animals, once the temperature gets warm enough, they just set them free, and you're talking about hundreds of goats and sheep just wandering the country, and then once a year, at the end of I think it's in October or September, they do a roundup. They round up all the cattle and livestock, and they go to everybody goes to one spot.
Really?
To find their livestock.
Huh.
And it's like a big deal. It's a big deal. We didn't get a chance to see that because we were there in August. So we weren't quite there, but you get to see, it's the closest I felt to God than I felt anywhere else in the world, because you see this, like you can go stand right next to this ginormous waterfall and watch millions and millions of gallons of water just spill over a rock, and just be like, oh my, like for me anyway, it was like it, because I believe in science, and I do believe in God, and I believe that God and science intermix. And I'm just like, man, this is what God made. This is because He is who He is who He is. This is reason why we have what we have, and we can grow to appreciate it. So it was just such a beautiful place. Did a lot of did some really nice hiking. Went to Peru. Took my family to Peru, and we took our kids. Like we've always taken our kids whenever we traveled, no matter where we went, from when they were babies to adult, to teenagers. We always took our kids because we wanted our kids to be part of the experience. We wanted them to experience the same things we're experiencing. And with that, we had to sacrifice some comforts to have our family together, but we wouldn't have it any other way. But to be able to be at those sites with my kids, it was awesome. Like we went to Peru, and we went to visit Machu Picchu. And you want to talk about, you see, when you see the rocks, you see how high, when you see how high Machu Picchu is, and then see these big rocks that these people moved from wherever the place of origin to where they finally ended up resting, it blows your mind. Like, it kind of gives you an idea, like when man is determined, what he can accomplish.
Sure. Yep.
It's just, and then the engineering of getting the rocks to fit into a specific shape is
Yep.
amazing, you know. So it's
Yep.
just it's something that you can go and you walk away appreciating what man was able to do long ago, and scratch your head as to why aren't we doing the same things today, you know.
Right. Well, and
'Cause-
it returns your one sense of wonder, you know, because
right,
nowadays between you know the ability to look up any information at the drop of a hat,
right,
between movies that have CGI effects, you know, that we just are just blasé to us, you know, and just the amount of knowledge that's available in the world, um, there's less wonder. You know,
right,
there's more just like, oh well, I should know this and this and this. But yeah, when you go and see something like that, you're like, I don't know how this was done.
right,
You know,
right,
and there's no way I could do it myself. So
right.
there there's definitely value there too, where just like, oh okay, so there are some things that are outside of my knowledge, and it helps you have a better a more honest assessment of yourself and your place
Yeah.
in the world. Yeah.
Well, it's also too like what the things that people were able to go to endure. You know,
Mm, sure.
we just went through the Hurricane Ian, right?
Right.
And like a week after the hurricane, our air conditioning goes out
Mm,
upstairs in our upstairs portion of the house. Miserable. I'm like,
right.
how in the heck? Because I'm thinking of the Seminole Indians. You know, like the Seminole Indians, like just the terrain here in Florida alone, it would have been swampy, hard to find high ground, mosquito infested. So you have vectors you have to worry about. You have crocodiles you have to worry, or alligators you have to worry about, and other wildlife.
Right.
Um, uh, the panthers that we have here, and then and some of the snakes. And these people survived thousands of years in Florida before we even showed up, and was like, yeah, this is life, man. This is how we live it, you know. Um, and then I can't imagine life without air conditioning,
Yeah. Yeah.
or
No
the inter-
kidding.
or refrigerated food, you know.
Yep.
So it just blows my mind where we're at, and but also like when times get tough, are we going to be able to? How are we going to be able to get past those tough times? And you know,
Mm, sure.
like where like are we so? Are you ever seen that show Lost?
It's ringing a bell, but
All right, so a plane crashes on an island, and the just about everybody on the plane survives, and they're just waiting to be rescued. That's the initial premise of the show.
okay.
Well, anyway, they go into survival mode really fast. Like, you know, people are there. Are some people who are like, no, we need to get off this island. We need to get rescued. And there's other people like, this could take a while, so let's start building some shelter. So
Right.
there's two camps.
Sure.
Where you can go, and most definitely you want a little bit of both. You want to be able to use resources for getting off the island, but you also want to use resources to survive on the island.
Sure.
So
Sure.
now there's a struggle between where do we put our energy? Do we put our energy in one thing or in the other? Well, the reality is you're going to have to do both, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because both camps are right. And it goes back to circling back to the beginning. Like, how do you take people in two opposing camps and get them working towards the same goal?
Mm-hmm.
Trying to produce and capable of producing results that will benefit everyone. And I think the answer to that is like some social scientists will say like, well, hey, we have the community has to will come to a consensus, and those who are uh, of one idea will eventually probably separate themselves from the other group, and then go to try to live their life, try to do things the way they feel they do. Um, but I don't know if we're even capable of doing that much in the, because there's just too much division. We as a United States, as a republic, we're too divided to even amongst our own parties, to come to join forces to do what is the right, what is actually right, with any type of visible consistency. We can do it once, right? We can probably, maybe if we're lucky, we can probably do it twice if the conditions are presented the same. But if the conditions change one way or the other ever so slightly, it can definitely change the way people view things, which will definitely change the outcome. So change a outcome. So it's I don't know if the politicians, put it in the politicians' hands is the right answer, or is it forming up little tribal groups like we have here at like we have on Twitter. We have the mill Twitter, some of the buddies call it, and then you have goon Twitter, and the two don't mix, man.
Yeah,
and
right.
And I'm not really sure why. Like, I do understand why. I know why that's the case, but and I think it has to do with who's shilling for who. Like on Twitter is like you have some of these anonymous accounts that are like a military officer, and there's kind of like a cute girl that's sitting there. Oh, I want to be special forces and I want to do all the same things guys do, but I don't want to make all the same sacrifices. And that guy's like, yeah, you can do anything you want. You go, girl. And then I'm thinking to myself, dude, she's not going to sleep with you.
Right, exactly. If she's even real.
Yeah, even it might be some dude, like
right.
And it's just, it cracks me up when you see these, like, there's one account, when I was new to Twitter, I followed it, and at first I was like, you know what, I kind of dig what this person has to say, and then I was like, they said something like, it had something to do with being pregnant and or pregnancy in the force and still being able to do your job. And I'm like, okay, in some instances, I get it.
Sure.
All right, you might be like, if you're an admin person, yeah, you're still able to do your job. But you know what? If you're one of the few jump masters that a company has,
right,
and you get pregnant, well, guess what? You're not jumping anymore. And you're not combat effective, and but I don't think they should be kicked out, or I don't think their lives should be any harder. I worked with a captain. Again, what I do is not really important to the what I do now. It's important for the force, but it's not a showstopper. So if a captain gets pregnant, where I work at, I mean, she can still work from home, and that's just the way it is. And
sure.
And that's what happens. That's what happened to the captain that got pregnant in my shop. She just worked from home for a year, and
sure,
she still made decisions. She was still competent. She was still able to do her job. But one of the things, but we got to talking one day. So her and I were talking, and I asked her. It was kind of like the same conversation I had with Travis, but it was me asking the questions, and I was like, so how do you feel about females going into combat arms? And she was like, I think and she felt the women that were wanting to go combat arms were only doing it because it was something new. It was something. It wasn't something they really wanted. It wasn't something that they wanted to pursue a career in. They just wanted to be able to say, yeah, I did that. and that's the thing that we don't need in the Army. There's a
Sure.
lot of schools. There's a lot of schools in the Army that you can, I call them participation schools, where you can go get the qualification and never do the job. And they do it, and I don't think that's right. I really don't. I think that's the dumbest thing in the world.
Sure.
To spend a couple $1,000s to like airborne school, for instance, is one of those things. Hey, I want to go to airborne school. All right. Do you want to go to an airborne unit? No, I just want the jump wings.
Right.
No. No, you don't get it. You are actually going to go, like, in fact, what we're going to do is, if you go to this school, when you get back, you're going to be put on orders, and you're going to go to an airborne unit. And then,
Sure.
And then now this person's like, all right, I'll do it, just to do it. And so they go do their time and then leave and never do it again. That's fine. All right, you got your money's worth out of them. But then there's other schools like Pathfinder, or Air Assault School, for instance. It's Air Assault School is mainly just to get you familiar with operating in and around helicopters, and then building sling loads to a specific specification so that the helicopter can then suspend that item underneath its belly and fly with it. That's all air assault is. It really doesn't take doing a 12-mile, 6-mile ruck march, a 4-mile and 6-mile run. It doesn't take. All it takes is for you to know how to do an inspection on a sling load and how to hook it up to the helicopter, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else, they make it so, like, they just do stupid things to make it hard for no reason.
Sure.
It just, and then anybody can do it. It's not like like you're supposed to be air assault qualified, but when you're in Afghanistan, you don't have that many air assault qualified people in your unit. Guess what? You're doing it anyway. So what's the point? What's the point of sending guys through that school if that's the case? And that's something that I don't want Ranger School or Special Forces or SEAL training to become I want to do it just because I want the tab on my shoulder, but I never want to have to be in a Ranger unit or a Special Forces unit, because I think that, to me, is a sacred thing. That those schools are a sacred thing, because those guys who go through that training and then go to those units are given, they're given everything. They're given 100% every day, where it's expected. Whereas with a regular unit, it's not expected. They want you to do the standard, and the standard isn't 100%. The standard is, in some cases, 60%. And so at 60%, you're on a scale of 100, 0 to 100, 100 being the best. 60% is a D, right? A D is what? Danger of failing. So that's the standard. That's the standard. That's the bare minimum you have to do in order to be a soldier in the Army, right? And then now they're saying, hey, we want everybody to have an opportunity to do this. We want everybody to, who wants to, no matter what demands, no matter what they want to, if they want to join Special Forces, they can. Like, hold on, no, there's a process through this, and you have to go through the process. And, well, the process is too hard and it's not accessible for everybody. Well, no, that's the whole point. That is the whole point,
Right.
The whole point is, and then guess what? Once you get your tab, you're expected to perform at a certain level every time, all the time. Here I am, retired, and I feel like I'm still in the Army because I got that. I was awarded that stupid tab, but it's, some of the guys that we follow, some of the people that we mutually follow on on Twitter. They absolutely love their job, man. They like to get a guy that supports special forces or a Navy SEAL team or whatever. Those guys are the cream of the crop. Those guys are truck drivers that love being truck drivers. They're admins that love being admins. They're radio men that love being radio men. Uh, it sucked being in the Army in a communications unit where people hated I told you, I hated my job, but I did it. I did it with enthusiasm. I was like, yeah, all right, this is cool. We get to go out.
Sure.
We get to go out. We get to go out into the world and do some cool stuff,
Right.
But yeah, but it really sucked being around people who didn't want to be there. I don't know if you ever worked those type of jobs, but
right.
And where you really enjoyed your job, and then you're working around people who really don't like the job.
Right.
And,
yeah. It just brings everybody down.
I walked into my first ODA, everybody there was like, loved what they were doing.
Yep.
And then we only had like a 12 special forces team has 12 guys. When I got to my team, I think there was maybe 6. We had half that, 7, I think 7. And now I made number 8. So we didn't have a full special forces team, and we were busy. I got, because I was the youngest, people didn't have confidence in me. And because I came from what they considered a soft SOFT skill, MOS in the Army,
right?
That I needed a little more training than everybody else, which I didn't really mind, but it took some time for me to get where, it took some time to get the new guys smell off of me. And when I was able to prove my worth, a lot of the shenanigans I was involved in went away. So, having that new guy smell, I mean, they can see you a mile away,
Right. Right.
Can you hear me? You can hear me. I can't hear you.
Oh, no? Oh. And ta-da. Oh, now it's saying your mic is unknown, but that just
hello.
Yeah, it's that one.
Yeah, it's that one. All right.
So it should be good. Okay. I don't remember where we were, but as usual, we had technical issues, so we'll blame me.
I don't know. Just ask a question and we can go from there.
Yeah. I do have a few questions that I like to ask every guest. I was considering, since we're doing everything different on this episode, to just not, but I will anyways. One question: when if a young kid told you I want to join the military, what advice do you have for me? What would you say in response to that?
If he's under 18, I would say, I would first ask why. I want to know why. What's your reason? Because my first answer would be, hey, go out and experience life for a year or two before you make that decision. See what's out there.
Mm-hmm.
Because that 1 year away from home or experiencing life before you join the military will give you a lot of opportunity of growth. Because you're a young kid in there that's 18-year-old, their brain isn't fully developed.
Right.
They don't know what it's like to really go through a real breakup. They don't know what it's like to get yelled at by somebody that's younger than they are, and they can't do anything about it. Um, I would definitely say, hey, and I've had this discussion with kids. I'm like, no, once you put it off, think about it when you come back. It's up to you, but I would wait until you're about 21, 22 to do it. Go get some college experience, experience, see a few things in life so that you know what you got. You
Sure.
have something to fight for. When I joined when I was 23, I had something to fight for.
Right.
So that was one thing. Stupid glares.
It's given a nice effect to the
Yeah.
picture.
But yeah, so having that opportunity to see other things in life, and serve other people was really nice. And
Mm-hmm.
That being charitable, learning to be charitable, sacrificing for something other than your country, I think is a good thing to do before you go all in. A lot of guys that joined off the street for SF, some of them were one guy that was in my company. He was sailing around the world in a sailboat when 9/11 occurred, and he sailed into New York or Boston, somewhere on the East Coast, and sold his boat and enlisted into the Army.
Wow.
Like,
yep.
He was like, yeah, dude, I was in the middle of sailing around the world when that happened.
Right.
Another guy was a dancer, he was a dancer for Britney Spears. So he was on tour.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, when 9/11 happened, and quit. And
wow.
He was in my unit. It was kind of weird because, you sitting around the team room getting to know one another, and you find out like a guy that's on your team is now, not now, but he used to be a dancer,
right.
A stage dancer. Like, get
right.
the crap out of here, or so there's opportunities for kids to grow that I would definitely tell them, to take advantage of before they decide to, go all in and join the military, because they can get injured, just in training alone.
Sure.
So yeah, that's what I would tell them. I'd be like, hey, just experience a few things, get a girlfriend, go to college, because there's some advantages of going to college before joining, and
sure.
Not a bad deal,
What's something you know now that you wish you'd known before you joined?
Something that I know now that I wish I knew before I joined. There's nothing. There's a lot of things that I wish I would have known about the Army, but at the end of the day, I'm glad I found out exactly when I needed to find out.
Right.
Because you can sit there, because there's no war gaming your first 3 years in the Army. There's no war game in it. You're told where to be, when to be there, how to be there. Your life is dictated to you. So, had I known, I wish they would have, because when I joined the Army, you couldn't join Special Forces off the street. You had to have at least 3 years in the military or be promotable to sergeant before you can go to before you can go to selection.
Right.
And so had I known, there's nothing I would have changed, but I would have definitely uh, trained a little bit harder
Mm,
before going, while I was in the military. During my
sure.
time, I was waiting for that transition. I was
Sure.
in good shape, man. I mean, I tell you, I was really good shape. And 9/11, man, everything meant, after 9/11, everything meant, I gave meaning to everything I did. Like
Mm,
every push up was because I needed to be strong enough to get through the Q course. Every run, I needed to be fast enough to make it to a team. Every rucksack, every ruck march, because this is what Green Berets do. So, um,
hmm,
everything about, everything about, everything up to, in leading up to 9/11 and after 9/11 changed. Like I wasn't the same. I was definitely not the same type of soldier I was on September 10th than I was on September 12th.
mm, sure.
Like, because because everything became real.
Yep.
And so,
Different focus and yeah.
yeah, yeah. And
Hmm,
it's not until you're really facing that, it's different for everyone, but I think it's not really until you're facing those situations that things that things were once a fantasy become reality all of a
mm-hmm,
sudden. So
hmm.
yeah, that's how I would answer that.
Well, let's assume that that the list, and I think it's a safe assumption that the listener enjoys the sound of your voice and wants to hear more of it. How would they go about that, or if they want to look into you or follow you somewhere, what's
Well,
the
they
best
can
way
just
to do
follow
that?
me on Facebook. I have a YouTube channel where where I was doing land navigation,
Mm,
map reading, just basics. I do that for a living anyway, so I was just like, you know what, I think some people uh, would enjoy this, and then I got into it for a little bit, and then I just kind of petered out.
mm,
Um, but see, hearing my lovely voice, you can probably catch me on catch a couple of the some other podcasts that I've been on. There Will Be Bourbon by Eric.
mm,
I haven't seen much of him on Twitter, but I've been on his show a few times with Joe Kent. Once with Joe Kent, and then a couple times just me and Eric. And then there's the Braxton McCoy show. Braxton
mm,
McCoy is awesome.
yeah.
He great guy to talk to, full of good insight. He's a cowboy through and through, and he has the what he does a couple things where he has a couple roundups where people from Twitter will get together with him out in Wyoming where he's at, and go out into the mountains and uh, just see the sights. And the guy's really resourceful.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Citizen Hush, haven't seen him on Twitter in a while. I was on his show a few times. Really good dude. It was a great guy to talk to. Um, and then, yeah, follow Joe Kent. He's running for, I think, District 3 in Washington. He's running for
Mm,
Congress there. And if you live in that area, vote for him. He's an American First conservative, and he works. I actually went through the Q course with Joe. We actually
mm,
went to a few parts of the Q course together. It was pretty funny. He's a great guy to hang out with. We share some memories, and so um, look him up. He's a great dude to listen to. He has some really good ideas. I'm excited to see him. Uh, I hope he gets elected, and when he does, it's going to be really exciting to see him on TV.
mm,
He's been on Tucker quite a few times. Tucker
mm. Okay.
Carlson.
Sure. Sure.
And there's a lot of other Green Berets and Navy SEALs and service members who are out there serving, getting into the political arena. I thought about it for a little bit, and I was like, you know what, I don't want to put my wife and my family through anything. So
Mm,
I'm
sure.
a step. I'm just going to be a commentator on the sidelines, and then let it go from there.
Right. Right.
But I have the itch, though. I really do have the itch where I'm sitting there like, I can do this. I have some really good ideas, but I just don't want to put my family in.
Sure. Sure.
I
Yeah,
think
it's a big deal for sure. I mean, it affects everybody in your family, and not necessarily adversely, but definitely it's a huge impact. So if you do it, you definitely want everybody on board.
yeah, yeah,
Because it's a big deal.
Yeah, and then too, you don't want them to have to live their life a certain way in order to, you want them to be happy. And, your life is on display at any given time, and
Mm-hmm.
any little foul up can ruin it. And so you don't want. I just want my family and my wife to live a normal life, and just leave me alone, stay out of my business.
Right.
You know,
Right.
I'll help you. I'll help you out, and you help me out, and we can all be happy. It's just I I think I think social media has made little monsters out of all of us, narcissistic monsters out of all of us,
Right.
especially. It's like AOC. She made it big. Like, she wouldn't be who she is if it wasn't for social media, right?
Mm,
And the squad wouldn't be what they are if it wasn't for social media. But you notice that lately they've been kind of dialing it back as things aren't going the way they wanted to go. Like, they're seeing public
sure.
opinion is not swinging in their way, and they're now, until midterm elections are over, man, they're going to be, and then you see AOC right now is getting hammered by, I don't know who it is, man. I really don't know who it is, but they're going to anywhere she goes to go speak publicly. They're calling her every other name in the book, which I don't think any person deserves.
Sure.
Um, but again, I think her feet needs to be held to the fire, and I think I think the way they're doing it is making it known, and you can tell, like, I don't know if you saw it, but on the news, she was giving a talk, and they were like, hey, you need to get out, and they just start cussing her out and whatnot, and they turned off the lights, and she bugged out. I understood that.
Oh,
Yeah.
sure.
And then they turned the lights back on. She came out to face them, and they just weren't having it. And of course, it's the news and the social media. You're only hearing one side of the story, right? You're only hearing that she's getting, that she's being yelled at by these people, and they're disrupting her speech. But a lot of her supporters were there, and there's a little bit of an exchange. So I love fair news reporting. I don't care if it's in my favor or not, but I think I think the media needs to do a better job at just report what's being said, and talking heads and opinion pieces need to be tossed out the wayside. We're starting to see that in ratings, and like a lot of the late night shows. What's his name? Trevor, the black South African guy.
Noah.
Trevor Noah. His show's getting ready to get kicked off the air. Samantha Bee's show's getting kicked off the air. A lot of these talking shows where Stephen Colbert is barely hanging on. So a lot of these shows that were popular late night shows that were critical of President Trump, they have nothing. People are just not listening to what they have to say anymore because they're not saying anything new. And it's a shame where your political discourse is now being like comedians came and say things that they want to say that we used to think is funny. It might have been like in your face, but it was still, we were able to laugh at it ourselves back in the day, Nowadays you can't even do that because somebody's going to get offended, somebody's feelings are going to get hurt. Or back to my 30 Rock analogy, somebody's going to feel left out, heaven forbid. Like, heaven forbid somebody feel, how many times I felt left out in my life and I'm still alive,
Right. Exactly.
I remember being at a park, being a little poor kid at a park, and somebody was having a birthday party and they had cake. I wasn't invited to the party.
Right.
But I just happened to be there. Right. So it was just like, did anybody offer me cake? Nope. Because it's not my party. I wasn't invited.
Right.
And not every time. So my point is, sometimes you don't deserve
party.
Cake.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not your party.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, man, it's just, but like, I have friends who don't want their kids to ever be disappointed because they had it bad.
Sure.
Because their childhood was bad. They don't want their kids to have a bad childhood. And my argument is, they have to know, you have to tell them no. One.
Sure.
You just got to be able to tell your kid no. And it's good for them to hear no. And it's good for them to lose. And it's good for them to not receive a trophy. And it's good for them to experience a breakup,
Sure.
Because it's only going to make them better people. But it's another thing for you to be there to comfort them. Oh, hey man, it's all right. You're still not getting a trophy. You're still not getting invited to the party. You're still not getting a new pair of shoes. But guess what? You know what? I'm here for you and I get it.
Right. Yeah. And I'm proud of you. Yeah.
And I'm proud of you. You put forth a good effort.
Yeah.
Good job, And that should be enough. I don't know how many times my dad said he was just proud of me and that was enough. But now today we got it. I'm not only proud of you, but now I have to buy you a new video game, or now instead of parents telling their kids to clean their room, their kids are saying, well, give me money to pay my room. You know what? I'll give you the back of my hand
right.
and get the same result,
Right.
But on some instances, I get where the parents coming from. In another instance, there's things where I sit back and I'm like, I just got to shut my mouth and walk away. And just because, they're dear friends of mine and I might not agree with what they're doing. And I just got to hey, they have and there's always a good reason why they're doing whatever it is they're doing for whatever particular reason. So, but I just got to, that's one of those where I have to mind remember my own advice and mind my own business.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, cool.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for the time.
No, thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of How I Embraced the Suck. If you enjoyed the show, tell a friend. And as my Girl Scout den mother used to say, stay frosty.
There's a frame of thought, a school of thought that when you're teaching adult learners, or any type of learner, one of the big questions you want them to ask early on is, who am I?